5, they say. That's fun hair. God, you look reversed. Flip camera. Ugh. What up, Frito? Aorish. Probably pronouncing that very wrong, but what is up? Oh, wow. Look at that. 14 of you already. Amazing. How is everybody? Goal. Make super chat fun with the goal. No, we're not doing that. Go away. Thank you, Frito. What am I trying to do here? Share. So it'd be a really good idea. I'll do this out in the sun, but I can't see anything on my screen. Brilliant. Sorry, everyone. Just trying to figure out my life. 1 second. Any thoughts on Wolfgang Streak? I know nothing about Wolfgang Streak. The New York Times? That's probably why I have no idea who they are. I had to get a New York Times subscription for some, like, looking into some old newspaper articles, but I regretted it. But no, I don't know who that is. New Left Review? I don't know. Maybe I know who that is, and it. George Berkeley? No. I've never actually read Berkeley. But I mean, like, I'm semi-familiar with Berkeley's idealism, mostly just because when I was reading Kant, Kant's making all this reference to the limits of Berkeleyan idealism. So I was like, well, I should know what that is. Buddhism or non-Western philosophy? I mean, I'd love to, but I also don't think I'm equipped. I have to be collaborating with more people who are equipped to talk about that stuff fluently and have them on, which is the work I need to be doing. But it's, yeah, I just don't know enough about it to comfortably, start covering stuff. Democratic confederalism. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. My lack of a political science degree is probably showing right now. I don't know. What do you think? I'd love to know what you think. You wish you read Locke before Berkeley. Oh yeah? Why? What's the most important insight you've gotten from a philosopher you otherwise don't like or agree with? That's a good question. I'm not much for Hegel, really. I'm not much really. But this is me having said this, only having read the Phenomenology of Spirit. So I'm just going to temper this with that acknowledgement. But I'm not a huge fan of the phenomenology in any way, shape, or form, but something I really take from it that's really valuable is not the whole like, beginning like sense perception type stuff or the importance of recognition and all that. It's like the very way that the book is kind of enacting the exact same. The term he wouldn't use the term dialectical, but I'm just going to call it that. But like the book itself plays out the very same spirit that he's trying to capture in his search for the notion. And I think that there's all those moments in the book where he's like, he's setting it up for what seems to be like he's like, we've arrived, and then he's like, no, actually we haven't, and pulls the rug out from under you. I really like that style, and I think that it made for reading it both really frustrating and also really enjoyable. What up, Matt? How goes it in the land down under? Things are going great, Tony. Thanks. Things are going great. Berkeley goes into primary and secondary qualities, which is something introduced by Locke. I wouldn't know because I haven't read Berkeley yet, but I mean, Locke's great. I like John Locke a lot. How obsessive philosophy people can be. If you say, it's I guess we all are. What am I enjoying the most about California? This. My home is in Montreal for me, but like this is it's pretty nice, gotta admit. Definitely the climate. There's that song from the 70s, like it never rains in Southern California. It's not true, but it's pretty accurate. It's always perfect weather most of the time. New to philosophy, I mean, we all are snowflake. Anyone who thinks that they're not, I mean, they're lying to you. They're just really lying to you. I mean, I have documented evidence that I've read, hundreds and hundreds of books, and I still, I would never claim to understand this field at all. And that's the point. I mean, the world of thought is just too expansive and too broad to claim to understand it. Thought of Kurdish leader who was former Marxist-Leninist Abdullah Kalam, which is like a Middle Eastern libertarian eco-anarchist socialist comment. Ah, nice. Thanks, Neil. A kind of objective truth that is separate from our minds. I don't know. It's hard to say. The kind of a truth to be found outside of our minds, but is predicated nevertheless upon an observation about our minds, is that we still we have separate experiences, which is a truth. Yet it opens up a number of considerations, and I think a number of really important concerns about, like, regardless of the fact that we have very different experiences in the world. I mean, some of you might really enjoy tomatoes, some of you might not. We're able to still, at least this is one of Kant's implicit points, it's kind of a mysterious thing how we're still able to have like agreement and community and connection. If it's all, if everything is just pure, phenomenal variance from person to person, it's very fascinating that we're able to really come together. And in fact, as humans, I think we depend on it. I haven't read What's the Use? Hey, Sebastian. I haven't read What's the Use yet. There's a few of Ahmed's books I haven't gotten to. I assume you mean, is it Sarah Ahmed? Actually, shouldn't assume that. Ahmed, What's the Use? No, on the uses of use, I have not. No, there's a few of Ahmed's books I haven't read yet, which is, I'm sure it's great. This is normally. Thoughts on Heidegger? I think overrated. Heidegger is probably the most overrated philosopher. And I know I don't say that lightly, but like, you try to read Being in Time, and his whole thing is to essentially open up an investigation that he never, solves, because it's impossible to solve it. But, it's really important in asking the questions. Overrated, obviously extremely politically concerning. And you see, I think, enough of it within his philosophy to make me generally not interested in it. But I know that there's merit to it and all that. It is warm. Is MN? Where's that? Is that Minnesota? MN. What is the overall vibes in the U.S. at the moment, based off your experience? In Canada, the news around the USA at the moment is a lot. Does it? Yeah. I mean, it's also, being in LA, it's a little bit insulated from a lot of that. Now, I say that with a big asterisk in that, like, ICE raids pose like extreme existential threats to like tons of undocumented, mostly Hispanic people in LA and stuff. And there've been so many really important protests and demonstrations against that. There's a lot of like fear because I think a lot of the scary stuff is still going to happen, and so people don't really know what it's going to be like. I know that there have been like kind of internal talks at various institutions, like the one I might be a part of, about the possibility of ICE raids on campus and stuff. And so it's like, it's a broad issue. It's scary, but yeah, I think that most of the news that you're seeing is probably pretty accurate in its concern. Deleuze and Adorno, which wins? Who wins? I don't know. It depends on what. I prefer to read Deleuze to Adorno. I think Adorno's writing is great. I actually don't think Deleuze's writing is that good. Not like Foucault or Adorno for that matter. I mean, Adorno was an amazing writer. In more like, so as far as the act of reading goes, I think I would prefer Adorno, but the actual enjoyment I get from the reading itself, Deleuze every day. You like the mind-body dualism. I mean, it's a great concept. It's a great idea. It's one of the most interesting things that, despite how alluring and seductive it is, it's I think that Kant did a pretty good job at dismantling it when he just simply posed to Descartes. He's like, are you going to really pretend as though you don't like think in a language, or you don't think, the very capacity for thought is not informed by you having had experiences in the world, as though it's somehow like the separate entity, which kind of undid all the mind body dualism stuff for me. But obviously I know there's still a fair amount of nuance there. Well, a lot of privilege helps. Jaco Pasto. Like, I've been really privileged to have the time to read a lot of this stuff and to have a fair foundation. But with that being said, stay tuned a little longer and you're going to see lots of moments where I have no idea what anyone is talking about. There's going to be, everyone has very select specific knowledges that it's impossible to know everything. Do I consider myself a Marxist? Yes and yes, more or less. I think it's hard to define. Like, I'm working with the DM movement, which is under Mira. So it's the leader's Yanis Varoufakis, who's the ex-Greek finance minister, and his organization is trying to get into Canada, and I'm working with them in putting together some of their stuff. And they, I'm not going to speak totally on their behalf, but they're definitely a socialist-inspired type party, while I think that some of these terms they're trying to navigate or to figure out how to best use, imagining a post-capitalist world, what that might look like and how to get there. But while I'm very much indebted to Marx, I find a lot of value in almost everything Marx wrote. I think that there are a lot of limitations. I don't, I find Marxists are always so funny in that, Marx was the one who called attention to the opium of the people and like the kind of enchanting effects of religion and stuff. And then some of the most vehement Marxists turned around and returned the favor by deifying Marx, by turning him into a god, where they're like, they have capital and it's like their Bible, and like that's it. And like, I don't even know if Marx would have wanted that, but that. So I have problems, but I think it's great. Indian occupied Kashmir, yeah, certainly interesting. Salut de Montréal, oh, fellow Quebecers, la belle province. Thoughts on Kin's two dogmas? No, I don't. See you later, Matt. Thanks for tuning in. Goodwill among countries? Obviously, that'd be great, but I'm tired of relying on the goodwill of countries. I think that there needs to be power bestowed upon some kind of regulative bodies, like perhaps not the current International Court of Justice, but other ones that can actually hold states and their leaders accountable for their evil. I don't think Adorno won anything, unfortunately, no. You look right around the corner from me in LA, but LA kind of looks the same. Yeah, it does. I mean, LA has such a look, right? I mean, whenever, and this is, I never knew, I never expected I would know that, have this reservoir of knowledge in my mind, but like what LA looks like, having lived here now for like 2 years. It's definitely got a look. I mean, I'm in Eagle Rock. I don't know if that's near where you are, but the situation in Kashmir, I should. Admittedly, I don't know enough about it, but that just reflects poorly on me, and I'd love to learn more. I've done a little bit covering, like, the Pakistan India partition and stuff, and obviously the colonial inspirations behind that divide, but yeah. What else? Literary text genres. Yeah, well, I mean, one of my favorite books is called Waiting for the Barbarians by J.M. Coetzee, and that really resonates a lot with what I do with, like, conspiracy theories and stuff. Which is, really related to my specific work, but then other books I love. Like, I mean, I love Frankenstein. I think it's a great book. I mean, I admittedly haven't read a whole lot of fiction in the last few years. I'd read Zadie Smith's, one of Zadie Smith's books. What is it called? God, it's been a few years, right before I started teaching. And it's kind of strange how many of the things Zadie Smith mentions in her book that turned out to really be on Beauty, really resonate with my experience as a teacher. And yeah, let me just do one thing here. All right, Citizen Kane, the greatest film of all time. It's good. Greatest? I mean, I don't know that. Favorite pre-Socratic philosopher? I don't know, and because I just don't know the ancient Greeks all that well. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Thoughts on morphic resonance as a theory of formative causation? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Treat theory as scripture, yeah. Hans Knock Marxism and Psychopolitics and Burnout Society is fantastic. Yeah. Han's great. Byung-Chul Han. One of my gripes with Han is that it does seem to be a little bit of repackaged type. It does seem to be a little bit of repackaged Baudrillard without the proper credits, but it's good. I like Han a lot. Why the ancient Greek fetish on philosophy doesn't dissolve? Why someone's stuck on play? Yeah, I have lots of thoughts about that. I think it's, it is one of the limitations of like studying philosophy in academia is just like you have to go through the gauntlet of knowing all this, prescribed knowledge in the history of philosophy. It has to be the Greeks, and then you got to go to the whoever, work your way up to Descartes. I don't know, maybe do St. Augustine. You get up to Descartes, and while I see a lot of value to that stuff, I don't think it should be mandatory, which I know is a kind of a contentious argument to make about the history of philosophy and like how it should be taught. but I'm just generally suspicious of the way in which it's offered as like absolutely necessary, whereas like philosophy from everywhere else on earth is not considered to be like necessary. So what else? Where are we at here? You planning on doing more videos on E/ACC? Should I know what that is? Or is not much intellectual there? This topic is increasingly relevant with the techno-libertarian takeover of our government as a layman. EACC. Should I know what that means? Probably. Let me know what it means, and then I can answer. Ever heard of Gillian Rose? Yeah. I haven't read it, but I've heard the name. Have you got a critic of Derrida? It's hard, and I know it's not a fun answer, but I tend to struggle with like, critiques of so-and-so, even though I do them all the time, because, what Derrida are we talking about? Are we talking about like, the of grammatology Derrida, or are we talking like the cosmopolitan, or later like the animal therefore I am Derrida? These are very different Derridas. So, and I have opinions on both. I think that Derrida is generally, it's wrong to attribute this to him, actually. I think that he is much more politically viable than commentators have made him out to seem. Even some committed Derridians, I think, have overlooked some of the real merits of his work as far as like motivating, real political or informing political movements and stuff. But where I have issue is like in this always this return to the Greeks. It's like always is kind of this subtle return to the Greeks as the site. It's like the original moment of all thought, and like from which we can uncover the origins of like the present day thinking, which is like, okay. Epicurus, yeah, I mean, great. Heraclitus, post-colonial theory, yeah. I mean, I plan on doing more. I'm going to be covering, I mean, the books I'm going to be doing next, I'm going to cover some Jasbir-Puar and terrorist assemblages and the right to maim, and then I haven't done Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism, but I intend to do those. Those 3 books are going to be the next ones I do, I think, unless something comes up and I have to. And I'm doing an interview. Sorry, I'm doing an interview with Alexandre Barry at the University of Ottawa on his book Undoing Suicidism. But I'm going to have him on. It'll be the first episode, the first time I do a French episode. So we're going to do 2. We're going to do one in English and one in French. So I'm kind of nervous, but because my French is okay, but it's even with all my other content, I always try to really make sure I know what I'm talking about before I cover a topic like a book. I don't just read a book once. I go and approach other articles on it. If there's like something that doesn't make sense or that I feel like I'm not totally clear with, I try to do a lot of research to clarify it. But it's harder when it's about engaging in a language that isn't your first language. So, Kimberly Crenshaw is great. Thanks, OGC. Anarchy communism is great. Anarchy communism is great. I mean, I have my issues with it. I think that communism has to be a collective movement. Now, I don't mean that anarchy and collectivism and collective action don't go together. I'm not saying that. There are some strands of kind of, left communism ideas that are, to me, just kind of a different kind of a repackaged liberalism in a way that's like tries to make it palatable, I think, to people who've lived for so long under capitalist individuality and individualism, where it's like they're trying to repackage it for them and to make it appealing. And I don't really find that to be very politically conducive. And I think that it will end up, to borrow one of Baudrillard's terms, to mirror the exact same situation we're trying to challenge. But with that being said, I know that there's tons of merits to it. And I know that a lot of the kernels of political action against capitalist exploitation are going to have to be anarchic in nature, in that cannot expect wide collective support for it. Uh, but yeah, I can't say I'm super versed in that, but yeah, I mean Hans is great. I think that the Topology of Violence and other, like, Byung-Chul Han is doing great work. I haven't read any Wittgenstein, which is bad. I mean, I've read a couple, like, sections, but that's not, I don't take that to mean I've read him. So I'd like to know what he says about about Heraclitus. What's my take on object-oriented ontology, and what do you think about the idea that there are trends in philosophical discourse? Do you see philosophy as subject to intellectual fashion? Um, I don't know. There are certainly trends in philosophical discourse. Like, there's the committed kind of infrastructure of philosophy that allows very little flexibility and mobility and change and all that. And, like, so you have to read the history of philosophy, you have to read the Greeks, and yada, yada, yada. But certainly there are trends. Certainly there are trends. Am I super versed in them? No. I wouldn't know what the trend is now. Like, I don't know what's going on at University of Chicago philosophy department. I don't know what the grad students are up to, what is, like, hip and trendy, which, perhaps it undermines my claim to speak to this field at all. But yeah, what do you think? Effective accelerationism, I don't really find it very effective, regardless of the term. Accelerationism, as far as I understand it to be a doctrine of, like, trying to accomplish Marxist prophecy of the inevitable demise of capitalism, where it's like, well, if capitalism is going to come to an end on its own, why don't we just pump the gas on it and just get it going? I'm too much committed to harm reduction to think that that's a viable solution, partly because we have no idea what the end result will look like. But maybe I'm too much of a filthy liberal, but I don't want to treat people as means to an end, or to potentially subject people to unconsented horrors for some idealism. But yeah, I know that there's more nuance to accelerationism, but I tend to resist it. And I'm also influenced by Baudrillard, and being just generally skeptical of the logic of acceleration as a transformative tool, where for people like Baudrillard, and Virilio as well writes about this, like, the very logic of speed and acceleration is part of this system itself. It's and it would be like trying to use to quote Audre Lorde, trying to use the master's tools to undo the master's house. But there's more to it than that, but you should put your thoughts in. Hey, River Rune. Have to choose one. Don't be politely correct. Okay, David. Foucault or Marx? Have to choose one. Don't be politely. Foucault. Easy. Done. Somebody needs to use Wittgenstein's concept on language and apply them to critical Marxist theory. I'm sure that'd be really good. Someone take notes who's doing that kind of work. I think that Baudrillard's criticism of Marx is incredibly shallow. I don't think it's very good. I think it's quite shallow. I think it's a naive reading of the early Marx, the more humanist type, like, maybe idealistic Marx. But I don't think that Baudrillard really accurately grasps what Marx is getting after. And in that book, I mean, Baudrillard makes all these weird references to these texts that, if you read the Mirror of Production, where Baudrillard lays this out, the translator at, I think, more than one occasion puts in a footnote to be like, yeah, Baudrillard put in this quote, but I couldn't find it anywhere, and I have no idea where it's from. So we're just going on vibes here, because if you're a translator and you're translating someone who's writing in French and has put in a French quote, as a translator, you don't translate that quote. You have to go and find the original and then translate it from there. Or if it is already, whatever, like you have to, or find an approved already existing version in whatever language you're translating into. Because otherwise you can create confusion in the world of philosophy. But yeah, for Baudrillard, because he was fluent, he's fluent in English, German, and French, and so he would often read German texts and just translate them himself, which made it kind of difficult for translators. Like one of his common translators was Chris Turner, and I can imagine it would have been a nightmare to translate Baudrillard, even though the translations are really good. But he would just translate things himself when he was writing in French, like from German or from English or whatever, making it hard for translators to confirm what was said and all that. Nick Land's later conservative thoughts, delusional. You know what? I don't know a whole lot about Nick Land's trajectory. I know that Nick Land was obviously like, in his Fang Denumina, he's calling for like a black feminist socialist revolution. But yeah, say something in French. No. Someone once said that Hannah Arendt is the Ayn Rand of the left. Do they have a point? Or are they being too harsh? They don't have a point, and I don't even know if they're being harsh because I don't know what that means. Does Hannah Arendt vie for a kind of hyper individualism? No. No, absolutely not. I mean, she was committed to like the nation state and liberal democratic principles. Like I don't understand the comparison. Like, in what way does she borrow from Ayn Rand and transport it to the left? Like, what elements are coming across there? How do we know if an existing system requires Ptolemization or Copernican revolution or the paradigm, or we go to Aufhebung? I don't know. How would I know this? What do you think? My God. Thanks, River. Videos on Simone de Beauvoir. I've covered Crenshaw. I think I mentioned, I should do an episode on the distinction between like intersectionality and identity politics, because they're totally different, regardless of like, what the popular media and right likes to scream about. Kimberly Crenshaw and the history of intersectional feminism is not identity politics. It's very different from that, even though they've been synonymized or conflated to fit political purposes and stuff. Will you comment on the backlash of woke ideas in the U.S. culture wars? The backlash, like, against woke ideas, or woke ideas as backlash? I mean, right off the bat, culture war stuff, I don't subscribe to any of this. Wokeness, don't subscribe to any of this. Cancel culture, don't think it exists. I just don't. Well, I do, insofar as like cancel culture has been around for a very long time. It's just been like canceling Palestinians, canceling, indigenous scholars. They've been canceled forever, and it was only when it started to be like canceling, transphobes and rapists, did all of a sudden people start to panic about the horrors of cancel culture. Would you live in Germany? I love Germany. Would I live in Germany now? No. I mean, it's a police state. It's a fascist police state. I'm not going to live in Germany now, but I love Germany. I've been to Germany quite a few times. I spent a month there with my brother, traveling around. We started in like Amsterdam. I know that's not in Germany, but like then we went down into Frankfurt. I might get the order wrong, but like Frankfurt, Cologne, then down to Munich. Then we went to some other Eastern Europe, or well, not Eastern European, but Czech Republic and stuff. And then we went to Berlin and Nuremberg and Hamburg and Dresden. Beautiful. I love Germany. Doing research for my next book. Is your professional opinion how many? Oh, that's a very good question. I think probably one. Fancy seeing you here, Tiger Shark. It's pretty hyper real. Baudrillard. I don't know if they're fake quotes. Some of them I think are. There's a few things that he like comments on Stalin, how Stalin, because like I said, whenever I cover books, I check the stuff that people I'm reading are saying. Uh, and at some point in one of his books, it was probably in Simulacra and Simulation, he makes this claim that like Stalin had this body double that had died or something. I'm probably gonna misremember this, and how his body double's death had an effect on Stalin. Is this like how the double is like, indistinguishable from the original. And then I couldn't find anything about that, so I was like, I don't know. Critical theory is great. I mean, I teach all that stuff. I teach Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse. I think that stuff's cool. Arendt and Rand are the same in their pseudo-intellectual capacity. Okay. I mean, if anyone said that to me in like any was like, don't you think that Arendt is a pseudo-intellectual like Ayn Rand? I would just laugh at them because I know they have no idea what they're talking about. Have I covered Guattari's work? I've covered like one or two of his essays and a bunch of the stuff he's done with Deleuze. Yeah, Guattari's great. What do I think? Compulsory monogamy? Yeah, I think it's very much alive and well, and I think that it's obviously connected with patriarchal authority and power. I mean, compulsory monogamy is one of the most efficient tools at suppressing and controlling women. You know, where it's like their destiny is wrapped up with their ability to couple with a man, and it goes both ways. And this is why I think that feminism is liberatory for both men and women and everyone else. Insofar as it like undoes what I think are effectively oppressive systems and structures. I mean, I don't know if I totally throw out accelerationism. Like I think there's a little bit more nuance to it, but Netherlands, cool. I love the Netherlands. Happy to hear it, McGregor. Normalization of hunger. Yeah, it's it's really haunting how cool we are with hunger. We have infinite money to send bombs overseas, but dealing with hunger, which is like it shouldn't stop there. There's so many other things we have to deal with, but like hunger and thirst are things that like no one should be dying of this. We have the resources for it. Like there's no reason for it. We could feed everybody and it wouldn't affect people's tax brackets or anything. Like it's yeah. Oh yeah, Daniel, exactly. Thought on the Marcuse Adorno student debate. If I remember it right, it's like Adorno was not into the idea of like aligning the new left with like the student movement and stuff. He thought it was a little bit too misdirected, maybe off like left-wing reactionary. Whereas Marcuse was like, no, the students are like the lifeblood of this. And I'm definitely more on Marcuse's side with that, regardless of my criticisms of academia in general. But I think that Adorno is a real stick in the mud. He's like the last person you'd want to invite to your party, and it shows. It shows in his political gumption and revolutionary spirit, which I think is almost non-existent, which is pretty embarrassing. And I don't think Marcuse is perfect, but I think that at least he was trying to put his ideas into practice in some way. I know I have to do Simone de Beauvoir. Like I know I do. One day I'm gonna do the second sex. I would have done it sooner, but it's like 600 pages, right? Or like 800 pages. So yeah. Yeah, he put the fake Ecclesiastes verse in Simulacra and Simulation, but that was like very deliberate. Like he knew what he was doing there. In therapy, do I bring up the philosophy stuff? No, I don't bring up philosophy stuff. I mean, it's like I don't have any of the expertise required to be a therapist, so I'm not like, oh, I know so much about philosophy, therefore I know how to do therapy. That being said, I mean, obviously there are moments where I'm like, I'm informed by some even like psychoanalysis and stuff where I'm like, actually, I think that this approach would be better, but I keep that to myself. And I'm like, I don't, you know. Thanks, John Boy. All of all of Western philosophy is footnotes to Plato. Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know how people are so confident saying such ludicrous, grandiose things. It's for, you say something like that just for like the almost like the kind of it's like rage bait, it's just like to drum up engagement. But I think I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Every no, let me change it. All of Western philosophy is footnotes to the dictionary or the thesaurus. There, I've done it too. Easy. Fiction book I read last year. Did I read a fiction book last year? I think I did. I don't know. I don't know. I may not have done that. Um, I haven't watched Andor. No, I haven't. I've heard it's good, but I haven't watched Andor. I will. I'd like to cover Max Stirner. It'll be a way for me to really alienate myself from my Marxist friends, my really diehard committed Marxist friends. If I covered Max Stirner, but yeah, I want to cover the ego and it's called the ego something. This is deep in my memory pool, but I've never covered it before. Uh, yeah, I'll make the Simone de Beauvoir video right now. What's my take on Luigi Mangione? With everything going on, I mean, I think that Luigi he did something that he was tragically forced to do something horrible. It's tragic. It's horrible. It's so horrible. Um, but I think it's a very good way to criticize, or at least posing the question, is um, to collectively acknowledge just how evil the healthcare industry is. Of course, a tragedy, terrible, terrible tragedy. But yeah, Michael Thompson's The Twilight of the Self. That sounds really familiar. I've probably encountered it before, but I've never read it. Uh, yeah, I have read Maps of Meaning. He doesn't know anything. It's really embarrassing. Like, I don't know why he wrote that book, and I don't think he understands the thing he claims to understand the most, like totalitarianism and dictatorships and everything. He is the absolute embodiment of of what led to those things. Uh, his blind submission to authority, and it's like it's ridiculous. Uh, yeah. Zizek and Gabriel. David is a beef between Zizek and Gabriel Rockhill. Why do you think Gabriel Rockhill hates Foucault? He says Foucault is the establishment mouthpiece. Your thought? That's funny. I got the YouTube channel India and the Global Left reached out to me to debate Gabriel Rockhill, and I think that would be cool. I think that'd be fun. I treat it like a debate. Like I don't want to commit myself to the whole like dunking phenomenon. It would be more interesting to have a conversation because, to be totally honest, I don't understand any of those critiques. A lot of those critiques are inspired first and take for granted this idea that like there's this thing called postmodernism, and all the people that they clump within it somehow share these same views, like Foucault, Baudrillard, Deleuze, you name it, when they're totally different. And I think that anybody who's like even uses the word postmodernism, you've already lost me. I'm like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? Are we talking about Baudrillard? If so, which Baudrillard are we talking about? Are we talking about Deleuze? If so, which Deleuze? It's just English American academics. Just my theory is that in the 70s, and it partly isn't their fault, but in the 70s, a number of these French philosophy texts were being translated into English, but they weren't being translated in the right order, and they were being translated kind of sporadically and all over the place. And it made a difficult situation for a lot of English academics in North America and the rest of Europe, and in Europe, to engage with those ideas. And I think this produced the conditions for English academics to just write off French philosophy for a long time. And this has now mutated into this general like boogeyman effect of like blaming the decline of academia or like the political potential of academia on the postmodernism or on Foucault or anything like that. And it's like Foucault's as you said, a kind of what is it, an establishment mouthpiece. Establishment mouthpiece, yeah, Foucault. I think you could I could just say the same thing about Marx. I think Marx was an establishment mouthpiecer. I mean, he stood very well for establishment patriarchy. He loved that stuff. He stood so well for establishment Eurocentrism. I mean, he loved the idea of colonizing India. How is that not pro-establishment? That's why these Marxist types, they make me laugh more than anything else. But it's yeah. Yeah. See, there are a few topics y'all can pose, and you get me going, and I get passionate. Yeah, Joe Kirkland, that's it. The ego in its own. Allegedly, yeah, exactly. Sorry, allegedly, yes. I should, yeah. Luigi's innocent. Shacharius. Have you ever read Reason and Revolution by Marcuse? I actually haven't read that one. Ego in its own is satire. Interesting. I should probably know that going in. Right. That makes sense. Kristeva contra Deleuze and Guattari. I got to read more Kristeva. It's definitely a blank spot for me. Because most of my engagement with Kristeva is through the critiques, like the way that Butler writes about Kristeva, the way that Deleuze and Guattari write about Kristeva. But I got to read more Kristeva. Thoughts on Jung? I mean, I don't know enough to give a comprehensive or, excuse me, what I think to be like an accurate response. I feel like I understand dialectics. I can recognize dialectical analysis phenomena, but I don't think I could easily explain dialectics to someone. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know. Dialectics, are dialectics themselves not subject to dialectics, making them always elusive, kind of always in transformation? Like, it's not it's like dialectics in its popular framing is the velocity to what is like acceleration. Not accelerationism and how we've been talking about, but just like as far as measurements of speed and the progression of speed. Where like we often submit dialectics to this kind of full velocity paradigm, as though we're just describing transformation, as though dialectics itself is not transforming. Whereas with acceleration, we're not only describing speed or how things move, but the rate at which they move, which is like an element that is kind of lost in popular understandings of dialectics, and I think would account for some of the challenges found even in trying to understand dialectics, because it goes through various phases and flows, different speeds. It goes backwards, if you believe Adorno. It's stuff like that. It's very difficult. History of sexuality. What do you mean by the nature of sexuality and sex through a dialogue? That's a big question, but Foucault pretty much says in short, he's like, the myth that has run rampant throughout Europe and elsewhere has been that like in order for society to function, sexuality, sexual desire, among other things, needs to be repressed. Where Foucault is like, really? Like, are we really going to pretend as though sex is something that is repressed? How can we really claim that when there actually seems to be this explosion of explosion of discourse around sexuality in public everyday discourse, in scientific discourse, in social science discourse, in the humanities and literature and everything, like an explosion of it? And he's like, perhaps, and he's clear too. He's like, he's like, I'm not totally saying that sexuality isn't repressed. He doesn't go that far. He makes it really clear. He's like, of course we can find instances of its repression, but he's like, overall, instead, I think that it's better to understand the way in which discourse and the circulation of sexual discourse is itself a means of control. And it's all the more pernicious because it provides this illusion that it is free and open and unlimited and all that. But as soon as it's submitted to discourse and dialogue, it actually has to it's confining itself to very narrow kind of linguistic possibilities. Even in the discourse around it, it's quite narrow. Or if it chooses to expand into various territories, it always brings with it like this insistence upon the sanctity of various like identities or categories, uh, which is something that it has its merits, but also has these issues where it's like it's fantastic that more and more people have more and more terms to understand themselves, to understand their sexual desire, to understand their sexuality. But like the thing to be wary of, and that Foucault encourages us to be wary of, is the way in which that these very discourses are less means of self-expression, because he's cautious about the self altogether, but just to be simple for now, he thinks they're less about just pure self-expression and more about easily classifying oneself to fit within a broader matrix of intelligibility that can then organize people and discern them based off of their proximity to various norms, to ideals, to everything like this. But, yeah. Phenomenology, the Acting Person. Would you ever read it? Maybe. Maybe. I don't see why not. Philosophy Tube's new video essay whether Nietzsche was woke or not and the discourse it spawned. I mean, I was not to be like I was talking about that first. I did a TikTok video on that a while ago, but I also my first publication back in like 2017 was a pretty much like being like Jordan Peterson doesn't understand Nietzsche because Nietzsche is essentially a left winger, and as far as Peterson would understand that, uh, but yeah, yeah, I haven't watched the Philosophy Tube video yet. I'm sure you've watched The Global Theory Industry and The Left Anti-Communism by Gabriel Rockhill. No, I haven't. I didn't even know who Gabriel Rockhill was until the other day when the India and the global left reached out and they're like, "You want to do a debate with this guy?" I'm like, "I don't know who that is, but yeah." Thanks, Roshin. Are you a Marxist? If so, what kind of Marxist? I am definitely a Marxist in some way, shape, or form. I differentiate myself in that I'm definitely not a dogmatic Marxist. I think that a lot of it needs to be adapted and rethought. I think there are a lot of limits to Marxist thought. I think that a lot of Marxist analysis, it leaves much to be desired and unanalyzed and unexamined, like the Eurocentric tendencies of Marxist thought or the patriarchal underpinnings of Marxist thought. And I think that these things need to be accounted for. And so I definitely align much more closely with like Marxist feminism and Marxist intersectional feminism mostly. I have never read Abdullah Öcalan. I haven't before. I wasn't planning to do episodes on decolonizing methodologies, but I mean, it would be great at some point. I should read Divya Dwivedi. Sorry, Indian philosopher trained in the Derridian tradition. Cool. Like, I wonder if it's obviously very problematic for me to be like, oh, another Indian who writes on Derrida, but Spivak, very committed Derridian. I wonder how similar they are, if at all. The most difficult, I think that the text I like the most struggled with could have been like the Dialectic of Enlightenment, so like Adorno and Horkheimer, but also Kant's First Critique. I don't think I suffered through any book as much as when I first read the First Critique. And I didn't have a philosophy background really at that point. I was just like, what is this? Like, what is the manifold? Like, you use this term like manifold. I'm like, what is that? And I'm thinking of like working on cars with my dad, and I'm like, manifold. Like, that's all I'm like, what does this mean in philosophy? But it's a tough book, and that made me. And then after that, I read Hegel, and I'm like, oh, Hegel, this is easy. Oh my god, I'm reading Hegel. Like, everyone was like, Hegel's impossible. Kant's easy. I'm like, you go from reading the Critique of Pure Reason to like, you go cold reading the Critique of Pure Reason to reading the Phenomenology of Spirit. I was like, easy. Still hard, but dialectics assumes we live in a dialectical world. It does assume this. Very true. Dialectics are played by Engels. Pure stupid don't fall for those laws of nature. Thanks to you, I'm going for a PhD with a focus on social justice. Amazing. Love to hear it. Could you share any tips about choosing the topic? Also, I'm torn between social theory and more empirical focused sociology. I would choose social theory. And the reason I say that is because if you do more empirically focused sociology, you're probably going to get pressured into do some study. And while that's really important and people should be doing like studies, it's a hard sell for me while you're a grad student and while you're paying for tuition because there's too many factors that, and I'm saying this acknowledging that, there's a lot of people doing this work now. It's really important and people should be doing it. And I'm calling attention to the broader problem of academia where it's like, what you shouldn't be doing that kind of work while you're paying for school. Which I obviously a very contentious point. There are too many unknown variables. You could get ghosted by your supervisor, which can happen in any other field. But like if you're really dependent on them to do a study, you can't just be doing social theory on your own. You could just bypass your supervisor if you need it. There's that. Your test subjects can bail on you. And it's so many things. You might not pass ethics. Like you might get hung up on that. You might get delayed. So many things. So I definitely choose social theory over a more empirically based sociology. Anarch. I don't think I am, but look it up. Yeah, dude. Then stick with the writing. Go after you get, after you're being paid to do research. Go and do that research. Just while you're paying for tuition, it's just I find it a really hard sell, and I find that it's a very exploitative element of higher ed. Like they exploit grad students to do this work, like this really important work, while they are paying the school. It's make that make sense. And the student takes on all the risk then, like of everything I just mentioned. Like it's so frustrating. They claim sex is healthy, it's good for the heart. Thanks, Saad. It's I think that teaching in the classroom has helped me a little bit, because now I have some actual experience. Am I a Telecaster or Stratocaster guy? Telecaster, all the way. Stratocasters look like toy guitars to me, but obviously they're great. I like Telecasters. I find that they got the nice twang, nice little twanginess. Rockhill did indeed. I looked him up. He studied under the French theorists. And I wonder what happened. I wonder which one of them was mean to him just to motivate his ire, his long commitment to bringing down the intellectual dominion of French philosophy. Louis Althusser, I obviously think he's an extremely problematic figure. I think that, how much of it can be attributed to mental illness, I don't know. I think that the irony is that, he was calling out patriarchy and then he murdered his wife. And it's like, how can I reconcile that? It's like, yeah, horrendous. Philosophy feels gatekept by the language used in references. I agree, totally. That I was thinking about Marcuse ordinary language philosophy section. Yeah, no, and that's what I mean, to be totally honest, that's what I'm trying to do here is like, I think that a lot of these ideas, even from the most esoteric, complicated thinkers, the Nietzsches of the world, the Lauren Berlants of the world, like the Donna Haraways of the world, they're very possible thinkers. It can be like really, these ideas can be presented in accessible ways. I just firmly believe that. I think that there's a kind of effort to be unnecessarily exclusionary within philosophical circles, especially theory circles, where they deliberately use very isolating and exclusionary language to proffer up their status and to be like, well, of course you don't understand, it's too complicated. When I'm like, no, like that, we can, anyone can have a conversation about Hegel if you just use regular language. If you start talking about the notion and finding like, whatever, the sense perception and all this stuff, of course you're going to alienate people. They're not going to know what you're talking about because you're not setting up a firm foundation upon which to have these kinds of conversations, which I find really frustrating. And I think that, even for my students, I try to approach this stuff in plain words that are easy to understand. And I don't think anything's lost with that. I mean, I did suffer with Hegel. I don't want you to think I know I was being a little dramatic. I thought that the Hegel was easier than the Kant, but Hegel is obviously hard. What is your school background? What did you study, and when did you get into philosophy? Well, I studied English at my undergrad with a minor in sociology. Then I went and did a master's degree at University of Western Ontario in theory and criticism, which was like essentially a 20th century philosophy program. But I also took classes on the Greeks and just kind of all over the place. Some political philosophy and all that. But and then I did a PhD in media studies, studying conspiracy theories, kind of bringing everything I knew about philosophy and theory mostly to studying conspiracy theories, which is really good. Hegel sort of explains itself after reading 20 pages, while Kant just keeps on getting more and more complicated. No, that's it. And that's exactly it. Like, I think that with Hegel, as soon as I started to understand that Hegel, like the book itself, is a kind of unfolding of the very thing he's describing, I was like, okay, I'm supposed to like not have those moments of resolution of like, okay, we have our benchmark, I know what's going on and moving forward. But with Kant, it's just like, you get it starts out so exciting. It's like, okay, space and time. He's like, this is the bedrock of all perception, and then it's like, where do we go from here? Well, then we go into the like transcendental deductions and like the faculties of the mind and reason, and it's just like hones and hones and hones, and you got to follow like such technical language all the way. I would like to cover some Kristeva for sure. Strats are fine. I mean, it's note taking while reading a dense work, just looking for advice for someone currently outside of the realm of academia. Not sure if that's relevant or not. Yeah, I take two kinds of notes. So one kind of note might not be relevant to you if you're not planning on writing stuff or like pursuing, your own research. You don't have to do that in academia, by the way. You can do your own research outside and do your own writing outside of it. Really encourage you to do that. But when I read things, I take the notes that I believe capture the essence of what I'm reading, like articulate the argument in note form. My notes are normally like, they used to be a lot shorter, more like bullet points. Now I write a lot more. So I see a point in a book, like a kind of main argumentative point, I write it down. And then as I'm reading, if finally the author kind of presents a conclusion or something, I go back to that note and I add to it. Sometimes in the margins, sometimes right underneath. So I deliberately kind of leave space to like look at my notes as being more iterative, and I develop them and return to them and add to them, so that I can go back and then recount the kind of tale of the story. And doing this channel has really helped hone that skill for me, because like I'm essentially beholden to you all, because I don't want to embarrass myself and be like not understand a text, hence why I do a lot of research and try to really grasp and grapple with the ideas. But yeah, with note taking, I try to really make sure that I'm accurately capturing the essence of the text, so that I can cover it in a way that like respects what the text is saying, while acknowledging that like, I'm gonna miss stuff, right? I might not emphasize a certain point, right? Or I might not capture something, right? And it happens, but like, yeah, that's how I take notes. So key terms is another thing. If there's a term that like keeps coming up, I of course I look it up, then I also write it down and put the definition and stuff. But I also have, you can email me if you go to my YouTube like about page or whatever, there should be my email. You can email me and I can send you some of my notes if you want and see how I do it. Maybe it'd be useful. I don't have a reading group right now. I might start one next year where I'll probably be unemployed. Lol, because I won't be back in LA next year, I don't think. And so yeah, maybe we could start up a reading group. Yeah, no, does make it hard to get Hegel for sure. The Membe helped you were writing your paper on biopolitics. Great, awesome, happy to hear it. postmodern historians. I haven't really thought about it, but maybe I should. Books on USSR history? No, I don't really have any recommendations. You should reach out to Tony from One Dime. He knows a lot about that. If you know the One Dime channel, he knows a lot about that. I think he has some videos on it too. You should watch One Dime's videos on that. I think that they're useful. Any advice for a new philosophy student? Read as much as you can. Read as much as you can. Not just the Greeks and stuff. I mean, the the funny thing about the Greeks is like you can look up what are essentially the most accurate like descriptions on like Stanford Encyclopedia and stuff. Do you actually need to go and read all of the Republic? Probably not. Unless you like, probably not. You're gonna be fine. Like you get Plato's Cave, you get the basic debates, you're gonna be all right. But with that being said, read as much as you can. Read full books as much as you can. Don't settle reading like a chapter here and a chapter there. Don't do it. Don't do that. It's good to get a sense of like how book length arguments unfold. How do you discern between Hegel's monarchism and Hobbes's Leviathan? Oh, that's a good question, huh? That's a good question. That's a really good question. I hadn't thought of it. I think it's a really good question. I don't know. I'm just there's probably a ton of people here that's like, oh yeah, that's already been answered by 50 people. They've already talked about that, but it's not something I really thought about. I don't know. I would only give what I think is like a guess. I don't think it's really an informed answer, but Leviathan, like Thomas Hobbes has very little faith in humanity. I think Thomas Hobbes is like humans are useless, desolate creatures that can only live under by being ruled. Other than that, they're doomed. Whereas I think that for Hegel, he has a lot more faith in humanity and has much more faith in what humanity has to offer and how monarchism is for him a way by which to amplify those possibilities. And whereas for Hobbes, it's like it is actually the foreclosure of possibility that allows for possibility. Allows for humanity to really thrive. I've gone deep into conspiracy theories. Yeah, I mean, conspiracy theories are great. I'm doing an episode with, I made an announcement about it, but with Jesse Damiani on his show. Probably will be out next week on conspiracy theories, but it's a tough thing for me to talk about because like I'm teaching a class on it now and it's, 15-week class. And I'm like already thinking, we're going to be in week 6. I'm like, we're only scratching the surface here. So in just a few minutes, I feel like I can't give a good overview. Sociology or philosophy? I tend to lean towards sociology a little bit, with a big asterisk. I think that both departments generally are trying to be a little bit too analytical or trying to appease the eyeballs of like the STEM people and trying to become a kind of like STEM field. And in both. That's why I like theory. That's why I think theory is fun. And there's just a kind of rigidity in both sociology and philosophy that I don't really like right now. In like what you're expected to know, the kinds of methods you're expected to adopt and to use to inform the way that you view the world and everything. And I guess I'm just too much of a Foucauldian, and I struggle with that a little bit. Yeah, I've read some Marcel Mauss, the idea of the gift and everything. Thanks, Joe. October by China Mieville. Cool. More videos on Nietzsche. Maybe. Like I'm reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra now. I don't think I'm going to cover it. It's too hard to cover, right? Because it's how could anyone? It would take like 30 hours to cover that book because it's like a wacky mess, but it's good. Yeah, take Sebastian's recommendation here. The Stanford Encyclopedia is replete with errors. Go fix them, JPB. Quick, go fix them. Please do a discussion with Global India or Gabriel Rocco about the subjects so the wide public can know the different perspective. Do you think I think that the wide public tends to be on that side of like, well, I don't know. I don't know which side with the, I think there's a general hostility to everything that resembles like French philosophy or like postmodernism that I think is completely misguided and is largely inspired by Anglo academics who just didn't put in any amount of effort to try to understand what like Foucault was saying. But I don't know. Would I have supported the second revolution? I don't know. I don't know. And Ark did something one time. Nice, yeah. You read Eric Davis? I haven't. I should. How does one-dimensional man square up with society, the spectacle, and its societal critique? I think they're really similar. I think it's certainly really similar. I actually think that Debord, watch out, Anglos, I'm going to pronounce it the French way. I think that Debord is like, a little bit more, at least in his words, feels a little bit more like radical and like we have to take action right now. Whereas, Marcuse kind of tries to like justify the need for action by appealing Freud, Marx and all this, where Debord is just like, yeah, let's do it. We don't need to, jump through all these bells and whistles and, prove like we understand. Would I ever do a video on Frederick Jameson and his postmodernism book? I've read it before. I would like to read it again. I mean, Jameson's obviously great, but I don't think I've done the postmodernism or late capitalist. First of all, I mean the whole late capitalist discourse. I think if I've managed to communicate anything to you all right now, apparently I'm just bitter and hate everything. But I tend not to subscribe to the whole like late capitalism rhetoric. I'm like, for all we know, we're in early capitalism. Like we're in infantile capitalism. We're in like, what do you mean late capitalism? Like that was an academic buzzword that floated around, I feel like, to try to like add some spice to a worn out rhetoric around Marxist critique, because it was not actually being applied. It was just being kind of contained within the halls of academia. And so they're like, we got to spice this up. We're in late capitalism now. All right. Okay. Have I read any Marshall Berman? No, I haven't. You're reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra as well. Nice. Yeah, Sebastian. I mean, the Stanford Encyclopedia is fine. It's fine. Like, yeah, you can mine it for errors, but anything you can mine for so many errors. Like, then there's no good resource to look at it ever. None of us would be approaching the Stanford Encyclopedia being like, this is the Bible. It knows everything. It knows everything. It has all the answers. It's perfect. I mean, if you're approaching it already like that, then you've made the error. You should never approach any text like that. Best secondary text for Foucault. I don't know. Best secondary text. There's the like Foucault Reader. It's obviously good. Is it a secondary text? I guess I wouldn't call. Actually, no. Not a good answer, David. Forget Foucault by Baudrillard. That's a good secondary text. Go read that. What should you start with Foucault? Start with Madness and Civilization. Don't start with like the Archaeology of Knowledge or the Order of Things. Start with his institutional critiques. Discipline and Punish might be the most palatable. I think Discipline and Punish, then Madness and Civilization, then don't do The Birth of the Clinic. Discipline and Punish, then Madness and Civilization, then The History of Sexuality, then The Order of Things, which I know is like kind of blasphemy for me to say, like, oh, you don't read The Order of Things first, or don't read Order of Things or Archaeology first. Like, go and read whatever you want. It's just, I think that if you want to get into it, you should be reading and rereading these texts in the first place anyways. But like, yeah, I'd read it in Discipline and Punish, Madness, History of Sexuality, Archaeology, Order of Things, which is ironic because those should be read the other way. But I think you should read them this way. And then go back and read them all again. And then you'll have a new perspective. Interested in Marxist philosophical work, wage labor, it's a bit difficult to follow. read for if you want to just get into philosophy, I tend to recommend people who are like are new to it and are interested in it is to read Descartes' Meditations. That's where he develops the "I think, therefore I am" thing. That is a very accessible book. I find it's not too difficult, and it's an interesting argument. Is it going to be relevant for Marxism? Probably not. But with Marx, it's like I don't think you have to have gone and read a bunch of the history of philosophy to jump into Marx. Like if you're reading like on the Jewish question or the Grundrisse or German ideology maybe, but if you're just reading Capital, I think you can just approach that on its own. It would help if you've read Adam Smith and David Ricardo and stuff because he's responding to those people, but I don't know if it's totally necessary. In ancient times, there's roots of post-structuralism in ancient times. Well, that's kind of funny because in one of my classes, it's called Justice. The second assignment, I get them to do is to find the parallels between the Socrates and Thrasymachus debate in the Republic and the Chomsky-Foucault debate, and to align like, okay, we have Socrates, Thrasymachus. I like to annoy people, and then Chomsky and Foucault. And I'm like, make an argument about who is who in which debate. Who is the Socrates of the Chomsky-Foucault debate, and what and how? It's a fun little assignment. I haven't read Karl Polanyi. Foucault Reader's great. Late capitalism has its roots from Rosa Luxemburg, by the way. Does it? Sick. Rosa Luxemburg. Reform or revolution? There's one option, one or the other. You're on our side or you're on the other side. Is Judith Butler only a copy of Foucault? Nope. Yeah, Discipline and Punish was your start. I think it's a great place to start. I think it's pretty accessible. There's some stuff like later in the book when he's writing about like the creation of deviancy, but he's talking about like the role that like petty crimes serve, and he's essentially talking about like the criminal justice system like a conspiracy, where he's like, yeah, they started to create these categories of like petty criminals and criminality just so cops could have some like groups of people to co-opt to better control the public and to use them as like spies. And reading that part, I'm like, I have trouble like making sense of it. Where I'm like, I'm not saying it's not true, but I just don't fully grasp what that looked like in the period he's writing about, which is, I should have done more historical work maybe, but do Kant's critiques have any implications on what AI can't and can know, if it can know? Well, it's a good question. Very good question. I think it's definitely goes to the question of like, what are humans capable of? And there's this point in Kant's third critique, so the critique of judgment, when he says something about one of the great scientists. It could have been Galileo. I think it was Galileo or Newton. I think it's Newton, where he's like, he says almost verbatim, he's like, Newton was inevitable. And he makes the point, he's like, scientific progress is inevitable in that way. He's like, it's just going to happen. And he juxtaposes that or contrasts that with a great poet, where he's like, no great poet is guaranteed. And I think it's like it's pretty beautiful in that it's calling attention to the way in which there's a kind of spontaneity implied in the arts that isn't really always found in science. And I think that if I think about that one passage to inform my answer, I think he would think that AI is incredibly limited by virtue of that, in that it can only parrot the past, it doesn't have much imaginative creative potential. But I know that it's hard to say. I mean, it's producing amazing works of art. Like, what is art? Big questions, but something to think about. Ethics of ambiguity, nice, yeah. Cool. Happy to see it, Novel Ed, to whoever gave you that recommendation. Chomsky is definitely closer to Socrates. I think that there are fun ways to offer a different reading, but it's harder. Bourgeois capture and domestication of philosophy, totally. What more is there to say? Philosophy is a tool of the intellectual class to manufacture consent for the world. Philosophy should be on the front lines of like any social movement. It should be guiding it. I know that that's a kind of paternalistic way to think about social movements. Like it needs these guides, but I think that philosophy can be really useful, and informing social movements is probably a better way to put it than it should be doing that. Is late Foucault a supporter of neoliberalism? No. Any positive thoughts of Zizek? Yeah, of course. Zizek's great. Zizek's. I think Zizek's funny. He makes this stuff. He makes philosophy fun, which is something that I think that he deserves some credit for. He makes complicated ideas fun, not necessarily accessible, but he makes them fun. Zizek has any legitimate critiques of Foucault and Deleuze? I'm not really familiar enough with Zizek's critiques of Deleuze and Foucault to answer comfortably. What music am I listening to? Well, right now I'm listening to, what am I listening to? The Pixies. Why did I have to look that up? I'm listening to the Pixies. Music I listen to, I listen to a lot of jazz, rock, hyper pop. I listen to everything pretty much except country, but I listen to a lot. I don't really, I listen music that inspire. I spend a fair amount of time studying music theory, learning jazz guitar. So that stuff certainly moves me. It motivates me, but yeah. Philosophy makes explicit what is already dormant in our movements, helps us be more self-aware, maybe. And I take that from Adorno, and I think that Adorno is right about that, in that Adorno harbored way too much wariness and skepticism about the efficacy of social movements, where he was like, we need theory or philosophy. We need it to guide the movements. Otherwise, the movements will just fall into massification and be ripe for despotic capture. And I really agree with him about that. I really do. Judith Butler makes a similar argument about the importance of theory. But I think that Adorno goes way too far in not actually putting his ideas into practice. And yeah, I think that it can be quite helpful. Do you think Lenin theoretical works have some values, Lucat? Yeah, of course, Lenin's great. Understand Foucault, the death of the author. Yeah, it's a tough text, right? It's a tough text. The emphasis upon authors is partly a search for origins, which is a similar point to what Derrida makes. And Foucault is generally skeptical of this whole idea of authorship. And the reason he's skeptical of it and is imagining the death of the author is that for him, authors provide the illusion that there are thinkers out there that are somehow free thinkers, that we have these people we celebrate and they've somehow ruptured the system. And we love to look at authors. We make sure to keep reading the same authors over and over and over again. They were so amazing in how they transformed the world and the history of philosophy and stuff. So it's like Descartes, Kant, and we attribute to them singular value. But we do that, Foucault says, in order to hide the fact that they were only made possible because they worked within very confined, accepted limits as to what they could say. And this isn't even a political point I'm making, even though you can make a political point about this. It's just that for Kant to even have existed as Immanuel Kant, in terms of the contribution that he made, he had to properly speak to the history of philosophy, to adopt the right kind of words, insert the right kind of references, and so on and so forth. So it's incredibly restricted, but that restriction gets kind of hidden away when we just kind of look at an author and are like, wow, look, this singular figure managed to bouleverse or to transform the history of philosophy or something. Managed to just overturn it, to break through all the regulations and offer something new. And Foucault's like, I don't know. I don't know if we can attribute these singular values to authors and stuff. There's more to what he's saying, but that's my 120-second pitch. Do I do drugs? I don't know. How do I answer that without totally sullying my reputation? You don't know what that means. Maybe I'm worried that people think I don't do drugs. Walter Benjamin makes no sense. Walter Benjamin's tough. I want to read more of Benjamin. I've never read the Arcades Project, and I'd love to. My favorite jazz guitarist, Emily Remler, I really like a lot. Emily Remler's two fantastic albums, The Firefly and From East to West. West, of course, referring to Wes Montgomery, but other great ones. I mean, of course, there's Grant Green, Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, Jim Hall. I mean, they're great. I just really love Emily Remler. I think that she really had an interesting ear, and she played wicked fast. Like she could really shred. Way too short of a career, but I really like Emily Remler. I think that if you're interested in jazz guitar, go listen to her albums, East to West and The Firefly, and yeah, they're great stuff. I would probably recommend The Firefly. I really like that one, but it's David Bratt. Whoa, yeah, I do. I love pop music. uh, could you point me to a book or article about the history of German aesthetics, or do you think it would be read? Yeah, I don't know much about it. I don't know much about German aesthetics. You read Hegel, I guess you get some aesthetic stuff there, right? There's I wish my Germanist colleague was here. He's teaches German romanticism and stuff. Speaking of jazz, Adorno. Yeah, Adorno has no idea what he's talking about. Is Palestine a litmus test for emancipatory politics and claims one supports social justice? I think I tend to resist the idea that there's like these litmus tests, like we have to subject people to these examinations to figure out where they sit on an emancipatory scale. But with that being said, I think that Palestine has really shown the limits of emancipatory politics, or at least among those people who've claimed to stand for emancipation and liberation, who seem really okay with like state power as long as it's Israel, uh, you know, occupying the Palestinians. And it's like, yeah, I see that maybe, especially in certain feminist circles, where the rhetoric of feminism has been effectively adopted to justify further hatred of Muslims, which is certainly a big problem within the history of feminism. It's why it's really important the contributions of people like Sarah Ahmed, Sanera Tabani, Jesbir Poir, who've called attention to the limits of like North American white feminism and not acknowledging the imbricating factors of like nationalism, of occupation, of colonialism and genocide in understanding the patriarchy, you know. David Sophie. Zizek claims that his problem with Foucault is that he sees Foucault as an advocate of mostly micro-resistance. Do you think that's a legitimate critique of Foucault? No, absolutely not. And I hate, like, these kinds of readings of Foucault are ridiculous. Foucault refuses, and most of the time, to provide like solutions to the problems he's identifying. But that's exactly the point. Foucault is just showing us the problems, and he's like, now we must come together and figure out what to do about it. Like, which is really, I think, commendable, because he's not going to be like, I'm not going to lead that. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, these are some of the problems, we have to account for them. But in his later stuff, I mean, you have the whole Iran thing. He's like totally for revolution. There's this story, I don't know if it's true, but one of my colleagues shared it to me, where like Foucault is like standing in front of a bunch of military people, and he like takes one of their guns and just like points it to his own body, and he's like, you'll just have to shoot me or something. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty telling. I don't know if it's true. Don't cite me on that, but I think that Foucault is much more of a visionary revolutionary than he's naively given credit for by Zizek and others. Thinking can only be done by the individual. Where are we at? Have you ever read Ray Brazier? A little bit. I've read the one of the things. One of the things. Levinas. Levinas I've never read. Never really read Levinas. Again, like one of those things, I've read chunks here and there, but not enough to say I can speak on Levinas. First year MA student and really unsure of pursuing grad school any further past this degree. Do you have any comparable experiences during your studies? Andrew, I tend to offer a lot of caution about going further. I think that doing a master's degree is a fantastic thing. I really recommend it to anyone I can. If you can do one of those master's degrees that's not part of a PhD. I think that with the current state that academia is in, and I know like this demands a lot of care, like the kind of what I'm about to say, but like I tend to caution people because I've seen a lot of people like lose many years of their lives to a PhD, and it's doesn't offer there's no guarantee of offering anything at the end, and it has to be inspired by like a real love of the topic. And if you have that, do it like 100%. If you're feeling unsure, take some time off and think about it. Like just think about it, and maybe you find the world doing other things sucks and you want to go back, then go back. It'll be amazing. But I tend to caution people. I haven't done any Lukasha. I should. Kurt Rosenwinkel, sure. Philosophers who admit to not understanding at all or are too impenetrable. Most of the complicated. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, like that I don't understand, who I don't understand. Lacan. That's why I've barely done any Lacan. Haraway. I've done a bit of Haraway, but I find Haraway really difficult. Berlant. I don't get it. I mean, I don't. It's too hard. It's too hard. Deleuze's Cinema. No idea what that is. I've covered it on the channel because I got a friend on to come talk about it. But yeah, Deleuze's Cinema books. I couldn't tell you what anything that happens in those books. The time image, the crystal, whatever. I don't know what any of that's about. I don't, because I haven't read any Bergson. That's probably part of the issue. But yeah, I have no idea. The Wretch of the Earth, talking about individuals, coming back and getting wrapped up in the details of anti-colonial movements instead of action has me thinking about Adorno's position. Sure. Foucault versus Fanon's efforts regarding knowledge as a practice of freedom and Algerian liberation struggle. Yeah, well, I think that Foucault is generally, and this is one of the problems with Foucault, where he kind of homogenizes and universalizes his own theories to like thinking about, but he doesn't. I mean, this isn't Foucault. This is like how people have taken up Foucault. In like all of Foucault's works, he's so clear. He's like, my analysis is focused squarely upon France. He's like, I'm talking about the history of France and like a little bit of England, but not like anything beyond that. It's creative purchase where they are just like applying this. So I it's hard to make that kind of comparison, but it is one of the problems in Foucault in that he kind of homogenizes the effects of power. Like and he says this straight out, like about the panopticon, it homogenizes power. And I'm like, Foucault would obviously be critical of any kind of claim to possess knowledge or what that means. But in the Algerian context, like knowledge is a tool to liberate people. And I think that Foucault would have been like, yeah, duh, what are you talking about? Some good what is my assessment of the Trump administration? I don't know. I'll tell you when they come banging on my door, kick me out as a pro-Palestinian visa-holding immigrant in their country. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, they're a bunch of clowns in office, and it's really like really shocking, like just how clownish it all is. You have Elon Musk wearing all. I mean, that's it isn't relevant. I mean, Elon Musk, like you essentially have this guy who's a rapist in the White House. I mean, that should have been enough, but obviously not. And then you get Elon Musk, and like, what is Elon Musk even doing? What is he doing? I don't understand. Like, not only what is he doing in government, but like, what is he doing in his life? Like, what do you want, Elon? What'll make you happy, Elon? Do you feel satisfied now, Elon? Poor Elon. It is a bagel shirt. Saint Viateur Bagels. Montreal, represent. Look, go have these bagels if you ever go to Montreal. Depuis what? 1957. Should the state laws be stronger than the federal laws? I don't know. Not a political scientist or anything. I don't think, I think that there is some merit to the idea of statehood and, state autonomy, but some things shouldn't be up to states, like healthcare, like abortion shouldn't be up to states to decide if people who can give birth should have rights. It's absurd. For a person, comment. For a person hesitant of a PhD, if you choose an engaging topic, it may be worth doing. If not, it may end up being a painful experience. Yeah, you have to be passionate about it. You have to love it. Yeah. I'm a full pro in the UK. Academia and PhDs are a neoliberal debt trap. For the most part, I agree with Master's point. Academia is so marketized, also inundated with bourgeois careerists. Very true. I think that's why I think master's degrees, it takes out that kind of like careerist preserving mentality, and it's just about the ideas, because you're going to learn great stuff. You're going to meet great people. Globe, India. I know you have potential. Love Foucault. I agree. Misunderstood. Shouldn't cancel. I think you should. I mean, I don't know. It's in Gabriel's court now. I said I would do it, and they reached out to Gabriel, and he's like kind of busy. I think he's busy. Actually, it's funny. I think he's on vacation till today. Little peek into Gabriel Rockhill's life, or something. He's away or something till today, and I don't know. Maybe we'll make something happen. I won't approach it like a debate or anything. I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation about this stuff. Where am I studying? Me? I'm not. I mean, I just study on my own. I'm working in Los Angeles at a college, small college in LA, but yeah, it's mostly studying on my own. Unless one of y'all got a postdoc opportunity you want to share. What is your opinion on the current development concerning the USA and Russia? I'm obviously very concerned about it. Obviously I understand a lot of the nuance around this. I can both recognize the turbulent history between Russia and Ukraine, and also see Putin as being like another emperor. And I think that, the whole like pro-Russia stance, while I'm much more critical of NATO and everything the West stands for than Russia, Russia's still a colonizer. Look at Chechnya. I mean, when it comes to Arabs in Chechnya, then all of a sudden the Russian tankies are like, oh, who? What are you talking about? Okay. But I mean, I can't say I know a lot. Best recommendation for accessible text that will raise critical consciousness with first-year uni students. Reform or Revolution by Luxemburg is a good one, I think. Also, texts that call attention to the bourgeois elements of academia would be useful. So maybe like David Harvey would probably be really useful. David Harvey's doing cool stuff. But yeah. Thoughts on Nick Land? I've just read some of Fang Noumena. Never really kept up with Nick Land. I know that the Theory Underground people do a lot of Nick Land stuff, and I really respect them. I think that their work is well, and they're very much aware. I'm not in full agreement with a lot of their stuff. I think that what they stand for is really commendable, and I think that they really live what they preach, which is more important than anything else. Is it possible to read the Rune of Kosh without a background in French history? Yeah. Just have like a search engine handy. Everything's accessible now. You can read stuff. In fact, it's better than having read a bunch of French history, because Colasso is just making up stories anyways. Not in of course. What you mean, Gabriel? Yeah, I'm sure we'd get along really well. Yeah, I think, yeah, probably not the stuff on Foucault, but CIA careerist. Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it's a spook. Who knows? Your university has a postdoc studying the philosophy of why the concept of exploitation doesn't exist? exploitation doesn't exist. I don't know. You could be the most like anti-Marx person, and I don't even think you'd hold that position. You would just say that exploitation is necessary. To say it doesn't exist. That's a pretty rich point. I mean, I'd be really curious to find out how they make that argument. Favorite analytical philosophers. I don't know a whole lot about that stuff. Philosophy of mind, analytic philosophy. I just know, Bertrand Russell and basics. Thomas Nagel. I'm definitely not the one to ask about that. Do you think anti-Semitism is a legitimate problem on the left, or is mainly used as a strategy by the right to divide? I think anti-Semitism is a huge problem on the right. I think as it historically has been. Can you find examples of people on the left being anti-Semitic? Sure. Do I think that anti-Semitism in general is a problem? Yes. Do I think that Zionist occupation and Zionist ideology motivating Israeli occupation and expansion and genocide of Palestinians is a problem? Yes. Both of these things can be true. But yeah, I think that claims about anti-Semitism is mostly a right-wing tool and a Zionist tool, both its right-wing and left-wing variants, to just forward Israel's agenda. It's simple. It's actually really simple, and I think that there's anyone who's tries to overcomplicate it is a bad faith actor. I've tried really hard to find the nuanced debates and I can't find them, and I've tried really hard, but it's you're being very generous with your time. Oh, Mad Hatter. I mean, I'll hang on for a couple more minutes, but then I'll jet. Les, les bagels. Montréalais sont surfaits. I'm currently in a PhD program in anthropology, and I have a major imposter syndrome. Oh yeah, that's why I started this channel. I just had so much. That's part of the reason. I had so much imposter syndrome. Everyone was referencing this stuff, and I'm like, geez, I gotta go read this stuff. And then I just thought, why don't I just I first thought, I'm like, why don't I take notes and why don't I record myself so that later I can see what I think? And then I was like, why don't I just write like what I think about a thing and then post it and then people can access it. But I really think if you're someone who suffers from imposter syndrome, that is a fantastic sign. It's a sign that you take the field, you respect it, and you approach it with humility. It's something that not enough, I don't know how you identify, but it's something that not enough men, in my experience, embrace. A ton of them do, but not enough of them embrace. They just like, oh, I get it. Anyone who doesn't have imposter syndrome is lying to themselves, and they're too marred by like their own like toxic masculinity and not wanting to recognize when they just don't understand something, and that's okay. You don't have to understand things all the time. It's okay. I don't understand most things. Procrastination's a tough one. It's really tough, and it's really tough because everyone has their own strategies of dealing with it. There's some apps and stuff like setting timers for yourself, like 1 good hour of like, if you're talking about academic work, setting yourself up to do 1 hour of work a day of like writing is infinitely better than setting yourself up to do 8 hours of work that you don't get done. And I think that that's a good place to start. And listen to yourself. If like you start trying to work and you just get caught playing online chess or something, maybe it's not your day to get that academic stuff done. And then it's like you can reflect on it and be like, how can the next day you approach it? What strategies can you employ to try to get these things done? And then you do that day, and then that might not go well. But it's key to be like easy on yourself. But again, everyone's different. Sweatshops are fine. Yeah, well, but that's what I mean, right? But that's different than saying exploitation doesn't exist, because that's what I understand. I think it's garbage, and I think that it doesn't. I think they're completely wrong. But with that, it's like I know they're being exploited, but if they weren't being, they would be dying of hunger. That's different than saying I don't think exploitation exists. It's which is kind of where both are horrible perspectives, and I think that they're a surefire sign that that person they don't know anything, but they are different in what those approaches are. Gramsci's resurgence is great. Yes, totally. That's always a risk, though. It's what happened with Marx. These self-proclaimed academic Marxist types who, don't do much with community or political organizing, but love to scream about how like Marx is the solution to everything. It's the postmodernists that are stifling political action. And I'm like, well, where are you? Get out in the street. Come on, we can do this. But it's always a risk. I haven't read that Butler text yet. I want to though. Oh yeah, Jacob Pasto. I mean, but like I said before, I mean, it's just pure privilege. I've had the time to read stuff. I mean, going through grad school during COVID was a kind of secret benefit, was that I just got so much time to read, and it was the one silver lining of that for me. I feel like there's a balance between philosophy that offers solutions, strategies versus books that dissect the problems. Yeah, totally. And that is a problem with Foucault. And that is a problem with the Frankfurt School, in that, it's like, okay, then what do we do? But I don't think that it's their job to be like, and this is what we must do. Because I think that is like roadmap towards another kind of totalitarianism, or any, maybe that's not the right word, but whatever, where they're giving us the problem and now we know it. Wow. Boom, let's get together and talk about it. What does that mean as far as thinking about social and political movement? How can it inform these actions? Do you think Baudrillard's theory is still relevant? Yeah, Baudrillard. I always like return to Baudrillard. Like, he's always kind of on the back of my mind, and I want to go back and read his stuff again. I want to go read it in French because I haven't read it in French yet. But yeah. Alrighty, Rizzlers. I think that's it for the questions at a time when I think I'm gonna jet. Exhausted. a lot of talking. But yeah, I hope you found it illuminating. Hope y'all salut, à bientôt. Hope y'all tune in again, and I'll see you at the next benchmark. Yeah, it'll be a big one. Wow, the 100K. Wonder what that'll be like. But yeah, that'll probably happen in, I don't know, many months. But we'll see. But anyways, thanks y'all. Have a good day, and hope you all stay healthy and well and fulfilled. Peace.